Hi, you guys. I want to talk a little bit about cells, okay, and cell parts and functions. First off, I want to do like a little comparison between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Just a quick look at this before I talk about cells, and then I'll go into the details of these structures. But obviously a prokaryotic cell, which is all your bacteria out there, archaebacteria as well as regular old everyday bacteria. They don't have a lot of stuff inside them, okay? We'll get to those specific things because I don't like this diagram and showing those parts. But eukaryotic cells, lots of stuff inside them. But more importantly on this sheet I want to show you is like kind of size. When we talk about eukaryotic cells, they are obviously like the biggest. This is a good comparison of different cell types. This is your regular eubacterias out there. Okay, and you can see they're much smaller than the eukaryotic cells. And then, of course, archaebacteria are usually even tinier. Viruses, these are the kind of viruses that infect bacteria. So these are bacteriophage. More like human viruses, and animal viruses would be just like the head of this right here. So they're even tinier than bacteriophages. And the tiniest of things are prions out there. They're actual like protein particles that can behave almost like a virus, can infect a cell. Mad cow disease is an example of a prion. And viruses, you know viruses, good old coronavirus out there. Archaebacteria are the kind of weird bacteria that live in hot springs as well as in the intestines. And eubacteria, that's a lot of the common bacteria that we find in soil, as well as some of the disease-causing bacteria. And then eukaryotic cells, just like our own. Okay, so I want to talk about these parts of a prokaryotic cell really quick first. But I like this diagram a little bit better. Okay, so in this diagram, what do we see here? Okay, and let's start working like outward in. Okay, on the outside here, we have a very thick like layer, and you might want to be tempted to say that that's a cell wall, but it's not. What it is usually the capsule. My pen's not working quite right here yet. The capsule of a bacteria cell, a prokaryotic cell, and a lot of times it's made up of carbohydrates and some proteins, and it acts like a little extra bubble layer around it. So just inside the capsule, and you can see that right here, that is the actual cell wall. Okay, and most of your prokaryotic cells do have a cell wall. Then inside the cell wall we have the cell membrane. And just like cell membranes of eukaryotic cells, we'll learn they have a double layer of phospholipids with proteins embedded in it. Okay, then going inwards, this line here is pointing to the cytoplasm. Okay, that little colloidal suspension that suspends all the organelles. Right here we find a little piece, not this big piece here, but this little piece of DNA, which is called a plasmid. That plasmid, and plasmids in a lot of bacteria have been very instrumental in genetic research and stuff. And we'll even utilize plasmids where we'll cut the plasmids open and we'll insert genes in. And we can make those bacteria then perform. This is how diabetics get their insulin. Insulin is made by actually injecting and inserting like a human insulin gene within a plasmid, and then as that plasmid is read or interpreted by the bacteria, it makes human insulin, and this is how we get our insulin nowadays. Here is a flagellum. Not all bacteria have flagellum or flagella. Many have many flagella on them. Some have just one, but this is just one, so that's why we're calling it flagellum. Okay, in here, there's actually this very light things. These are little secretory vesicles. Think of them as little bubbles. I don't like to talk about them much because we really don't see these much, like little bubble-like, because they don't have like a membrane. They're more like little bubbles of fat or bubbles of protein or coagulants. It's kind of wrong to show like a membrane around them, because remember, like prokaryotes do not have membrane-bound organelles. Okay, but they do have lots of these little dot structures that function in protein production. In other words, ribosomes. Ribosomes are not bound by a membrane. They're a different kind of organelle. They're not a membrane-bound organelle. Okay. On the outside membrane, and I know you'd be tempted to call this cilia, but they're not called cilia. They're called pili. Pili are little extensions out through that capsule coming from the cell membrane that actually help the bacteria like adhere to certain surfaces and all, and it's kind of gross to think about, but when you think about like bacteria that would be stuck to your teeth, it would be stuck to your teeth like with pili. Just makes you want to go brush your teeth, right? Okay, and then finally inside we have the main DNA. Sometimes it's called the nucleoid. I just like to call it the main DNA. The main DNA. Main genetic material. That is the main genetic material that really controls most of that cell. Okay, and that's a prokaryotic cell. All right, we're going to get to eukaryotic cell structures and functions, but I'm going to stop this here for right now.